Hello and welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Amidst the double-digit death toll, billions in losses and damage to homes and businesses, thousands displaced and infrastructural damage in the millions, there is an environmental disaster still unfolding in East Grand Bahama. Over 1 million gallons of oil were blown into the nearby environment during Hurricane Dorian, and now the company responsible has to clean it up. In this edition of On the Record, we focus on the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian and taking you deep into the Equinor compound on East Grand Bahama for a rare look at this massive oil spill and what is being done to try and address this potential environmental crisis.
During a hurricane, intense winds and rains are not the main cause of window and door damage. The most serious threat to your family is flying debris. The official hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th, but hurricanes have been known to form in other months. We Bayou Cell is this region's #1 supplier of high-impact windows and doors, located at number 163 Robinson Road. Call us at 324-6427 or 677-2856. Come and see us today.
Welcome to On the Record.
Looking for more On the Record? If you miss our Thursday showing at 8 p.m., join us for the re-airing on Friday mornings at 10, and then again each Sunday night at 8:30. Or go to our YouTube channel and catch up on all of our past episodes. And then like our Facebook and Instagram pages for a preview of upcoming shows and get a chance to ask your questions. Just look for On the Record.
Parts of East Grand Bahama look like a wasteland. It is where Hurricane Dorian sat for more than 2 days, battering coastal communities, drowning some who couldn't escape and bringing life to a virtual halt in the weeks that followed. But there is another tragedy of sorts in the heart of that community. Equinor, up to now, has operated with minimal intrusion into the nearby environment. This hurricane changed all that. The storm took 119,000 barrels of oil out of 2 tanks and into nearby forests. The storm compromised 2 of 3 tanks with oil supplies. 6% of the supply, or 1.8 million gallons, subsequently blew onto the compound once the tanks lost their roofs. Equinor is an international energy company with a presence in more than 30 countries with over 20,000 staff. Formerly known as Statoil, the Norwegian state oil company in 2018 became Equinor. Their primary functions include exploration, the development and production of oil and gas, as well as wind and solar power. The company sells crude oil and is a major supplier of natural gas with activities in processing, refining, and trading. Since news and images of the oil spill surfaced, the company and its efforts have been the focus of concern and commentary for many environmental groups. There have been allegations of inaction on the part of the company, claims that Bahamians were given improper protection on the site, and fears that the damage to the nearby forest and water table was permanent. A request for a team from On the Record to see the progress was granted, and we were given exclusive access to the property at South Riding Point. From the moment we arrived, there was an emphasis on safety. With the potential for so many contaminants to be ingested in the air alone and for contamination on the ground, we were immediately immersed into the full safety protocols now in place at the facility. We were told that everyone on property is issued safety gear. Again, a precaution to ensure personal safety is the main priority. Air quality is constantly monitored around the site. Oil and its properties can provide a potential threat to anyone working or simply visiting the area. There are 6 permanent monitors strategically set up, and a team moves around with handheld monitors constantly evaluating the air quality.
So what would you consider sort of acceptable norms, and have you exceeded that at any point?
So acceptable norms, we have an air SAP, it's a sampling and analysis plan, and that, kind of delineates our action levels there. So of course we strive for zeros, the lower the better. Luckily it's been pretty weathered, so it's been very quiet recently. And anytime workers are doing anything that might have a questionable atmosphere, we have escorts with them, monitoring the atmosphere with them, and also ensuring that they are stationed accordingly upwind, doing things in a safe manner.
If it's ever brought to your attention that you go beyond zero, it's a little higher, then what happens? What's the course of action you take in that?
So our SAP, it assesses exposure based on a time-weighted average, and so we'll monitor if the exceedance is above our action level for the set amount of time. We will either advise egress if possible, or of course egress, but APR is our first.
And who are these?
Could you say that again?
You said who do you inform again?
Oh, the workers that we're with.
Okay.
We'll let them know to apply their respirators or proper PPE for that. And if it's a situation where things need to be changed, we'll stop work, pull people out. So, what I have here is a map of the data we collected yesterday. As you can see here, we have a roaming air monitor moving along the road here for safety concerns for the public. They also go throughout the site and kind of cover as much area as possible. You can see the clusters here are focused around the vacuum operations and the workers there. That way we can make educated decisions on PPE. We also have worked around some of the operational areas with the Equinor personnel as we do startups. So things along that line, make sure that we're escorting them and that everybody is in a safe atmosphere to work in.
And the colors just indicate where the monitoring is taking place?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Overall, yesterday, chemicals of concerns were all non-detects.
You provide a daily report?
Yes, sir. Every day it goes site-wide to all the site safety individuals, and that way we can move forward on an educated basis.
With 365 people on property working to clean up potentially hazardous chemicals, there are the obvious risks, but the potential risks are taken just as seriously. A full-time doctor and 3 medics man the medical tent with a fully equipped team to handle just about anything that requires first aid.
We work for SMS, which is a division of Acadian Ambulance Service out of Louisiana. We were gracious to come here and support the cleanup here and provide some medical attention. So the way we had this initially, we were on 2 boats and we drove around in an ambulance. It fit for the time being. Luckily, the guys here that were here prior to me acquired some new issues, and now we're in a nice tent. We have where we can treat 3 patients at a time. We use our last little bed down there where we can use like a heat exposures where the air conditioning's blowing straight on them. We have a fan dedicated to them. We've acquired some stuff that was here on site. We have pallets for our bed frames, but we have a bed on there to where it's comfortable. We have our medical equipment to where we can treat first aid all the way up to any issues that may have to require, a life flight out of here. So what we do is when we come in, everybody signs in. We assign them a care provider, and then we sit them in the most appropriate area. So we've seen anywhere from normal common colds to sniffles, infections, to where we've got some medications on board for them, to where, knock on wood, thank goodness, everything's a non-reportable injury right now. It's all been first aid. Here's a Band-Aid, come back and see me, make sure I want them to do your good. A few little ankle issues, but they've returned right back to work. So nothing other than the ordinary, just going to see your regular doctor at home. We have all the equipment that you would normally see in a normal medical facility, all the way from Band-Aids to your normal cold and sinus medications, and we carry a very few antibiotics, which we also reach back to our doctor back in the States and speak to Dr. Thibodeau, and he gives us some orders or permission to put them on a patient on some medications. So we have basically set up to where we know where everything is. So we have it to first aid, med supplies, over-the-counter medications, antibiotics, our trauma supplies in case anything goes any worse than a first aid. So we have the ability. We were gracious enough to get the ambulance outside to where we can go to them, or the safety guys can bring them to us. Whichever is the easiest, because of the ambulance, try to hard getting out there on some of the roads due to safety issues that they've created, the issue that they help us bring them to us. But if we need to go out there, we work hand in hand with the safety guys to make sure it's the safest area for everybody out there so we can bring the patient back here. We've also dedicated a potential landing spot out here for our helicopters you've guys seen that's on our boat. So that's another landing spot to where if we have to evacuate anybody out here by medical reasons, we can go by helicopter and they come here. We don't have to go all the way to the top part of the boat. So we've been talking with these guys every day. We give them a report of what we've seen, make sure the paperwork's in order, and so far we're doing good. We're shooting on 100%. Everybody's doing good right now.
What are some of the common things that you treat here? What are some of the things that people present with when they come?
Well, we've had very few heat exposures. I think right now we're at maybe 9, and that's a heat stress. We come in, we cool them off, make sure they're good. They have to stay off the rest of the afternoon. We check their specific gravity and their urine to make sure that they're back rehydrated. A lot of it is the bug bites. They're not used to the no-see-ums, so we give them a little bit of education reasons to kind of learn how to prevent that, and also some medication to help stop the itching. We've seen common colds. A lot of our guys have some sinus issues. Again, kind of tell them, hot showers will help clear that up. Other than that, just some normal over-the-counter medications.
Nothing related to or directly related to the cleanup effort?
Not right now. Everybody's got the sinuses trying to get used to the environment, and the heat stress is one of the other issues.
The setup is designed to provide immediate care on site for almost any emergency. If any worker becomes ill at any time, the medical tent is open and ready for treatment. In the heart of the property is an area known as Wildlife Response. These folks are responsible for monitoring and rescuing any wildlife affected by the oil spill. On the day of our visit, a lone turkey vulture was in the care of the facility.
You see, we kind of built a little compound here for wildlife. We planned for high numbers. There were low numbers, so we're very thankful for that. But regardless, we were ready for high numbers of animals.
You said you were expecting high numbers of wildlife that you would need to treat, but that was not the case.
No, it was not.
Tell us, what the numbers were like, and what are some of the things that you treat, or explain to us how it works.
So, first off, I say I was expecting high numbers. I probably misstated that because it was a hurricane, correct? So birds typically leave when there's a hurricane. So instead of saying that I expected, I would say that I was prepared for.
Okay.
So I was prepared for the high numbers, which I didn't ultimately get. We're happy that we have a lot of resources that we don't have to use. But we're still prepared, as you can see, even with only one animal in-house at the moment. Our numbers have been very low. We've had a couple of snakes, we've had the turkey vulture, and then some very small barn swallows, and neotropic cormorants, sorry. So, and that's it. When an animal comes in, we come out in the field, we have a radio. It's radioed into us. We have a UTV. My team goes out, we capture the animal, we bring it back here. It comes into this clinic right here. You notice I have red and blue tape. So with the red tape, this is where the contaminated animals are. We don't move contaminated animals to this side. Animal comes here, it gets fluids because they're always going to be dehydrated, right? There's eye ointment, we take its temperature, we clean, before we put the eye ointment, we wash the eyes, we do just basic medical intake. We set them up in a kennel with a heat lamp because birds are always hypothermic. They can't regulate their temperature. It doesn't matter that it's hot outside, they still can't regulate their temperature. Because their feathers are matted and the ambient temperature gets straight into their skin, right? So you see all of the medications that are aligned along here. Also, it'll get a picture taken. Each one has a number. If you look behind you, you see the charts hanging on the wall. There will be a chart there for herptiles, which is the snakes, lizards, if I had any frogs or toads or anything like that, would be on one. Then there's one for mammals, there's one for birds, and then there's one for carcasses. We have started to see some of the birds coming back, but we also do wildlife surveys every day, and we're not seeing any oiled animals.
You aren't seeing any oiled animals?
No, sir.
I think it's important to Jerome, and we'll go see that, but the domestic wildlife is also coming back. We have about 20, a little over 20 pigs that we're actually feeding for the farmers.
Yes.
So they've actually returned as well.
So there's I don't know, the numbers tend to increase. So we are assisting the local farmers because it's hard for them to even get out there because they've lost their vehicles, they can't get there. So we're using the vehicles here provided by Equinor to get feed and water. We're taking some of these totes full of fresh water out to the pigs, and then we have some that are right here. Yeah, so we're gonna try and get the mother, the sow, back with her 4 babies back out to the farm where they belong. Of course, with the storm, they were displaced.
In comparison to what would happen, or if you could compare what we're looking at here to other areas where there may have been a spill or something similar happen, are there any similarities? You mentioned that it certainly wasn't what you may have anticipated, but any other things that you encountered here that are atypical or very different?
The only really atypical thing is the problem with how do you get water. But we have a ship that desalinates water. We fill the totes. We have a pump that pumps it. So that was very different. And I will say to you that I have about between 1,000 and 1,500 other oil company clients. And we've actually been drilling something like this for many years of what would we do? How would we do this? But we always dreamed that it would be on a vessel offshore. Well, we're not very far on land, right? So this thing that we've been practicing all these years has actually come to pass, and we see that it works and that we can do it. So it's a good learning experience. It's, a bad learning experience, but still something we've been having in the back of our mind all these years. We see that it works. And so I responded after Hurricane Katrina. I respond after a lot of storms, and same thing, the birds flew. The terrestrial animals were gone for a while, but they start coming back. So that part is about the same.
How would you quantify, or if you could categorize the impact on the wildlife, if you could surmise it for us, or give us your take on what the impact was, just from this incident?
This one, yeah. The numbers were extremely low. They were extremely low. I had 4 personnel here. We're ready to do whatever we need to do. At this point, we're taking care of 1 vulture, and we're taking care of the domestic animals, trying to help the farmers, and doing the wildlife surveys to make sure we don't see something else that gets in and gets impacted. The thing about it is right now, there are so many people working out here. The funny thing is that people are good hazing devices. When animals see a bunch of people around, they don't want to be there. And then you also see now these flags that we put up here are just for us to kind of designate that this is the wildlife center, but if you look along up in there, you'll also see some flying up in there. So we do have hazing devices out.
Yeah. It's more important for him to see.
Can you see?
Yes, I can. He can see us too.
What's this being treated for? What's happening?
So he had oil on him.
Okay.
And we've washed him. So he's what we call reconditioning, because when you wash a bird, you don't only wash the oil off that they got on them from the spill. You're also washing the oil that's naturally on their feathers. You know the saying, like water off a duck's back?
Yeah.
So what happens is the birds have a preen gland right at the base of their tail. They use their beak, they go back and they get the oil, and you'll see them like aligning their feathers.
Okay.
So they're actually putting oil on their feathers.
Okay.
So we have to keep him while he does that,
Okay.
so we don't just wash him and go, okay, buddy, it's up to you now.
He's left the fence loose.
Yeah.
Okay. And about how much longer does he have?
Maybe 4 days, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's soon.
And how long have you had him?
I could look on that chart and tell you, but I've had him a couple of weeks because he went through 2 washes.
A short walk to where a sow had taken residence, having wandered from a nearby farm, she was now comfortably resident with her piglets.
So the pig just roams around here?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
So what we're
Don't
going to
stay
try
here
to do
again.
is going to try to get, we're moving her closer and closer so that we can get her into a container.
You'll be happy to know that they confirmed they're returning her to her owner's farm. And coming up,
in wetlands and in places like this, we've learned over the years that if you try to go in and clean them up too aggressively, you can very easily do more harm than good. So those places, we're going to keep equipment out, we're going to keep people out as much as possible. If we have some surgical teams that would go in, and if there's a particularly heavily oiled area, we would go in, we can put marsh boards down, things like that, so we don't want to push it into the sediment, so because then it might stay here longer.
This portion of On the Record brought to you by Generali, your employee benefit solutions provider.
and welcome back. This segment is brought to you by Generali Insurance. Assessment teams from Equinor arrived on Grand Bahama by helicopter even before planes were cleared to land. Realizing the potential damage and what they might be facing, their disaster recovery teams set to work. 6 weeks later, they gave On the Record a chance to see what has been done. Weeks earlier, on another trip into East Grand Bahama, we drove past the site, troubled by what we saw in the nearby forest. This now was our time to get some answers. The forest across the street from the actual plant is where the majority of the damage is concentrated. A drive-in reveals oil covering the plant, trees, and on soil and on rocks. Some of the burnt foliage is the result of previous forest fires and some incursion from seawater. But there is no denying that this is where the majority of the oil was set down.
Impact. Our teams of scientists came out and walked through the forest and mapped the different conditions that are out here. In some places, oil is as where we started out near the terminal. It's on the ground, it's on the trees, it's throughout. As you get further and further into the forest where the hurricane surge came in, the oil was kept off the forest floor, like right here. And as you walk into here, not a very long distance into here, you will start to find a little bit of oil residue on the needles and the leaves, but not on the ground. We categorized areas based on whether it was on the ground or whether it was just on vegetation, because it may have a different response or it may have a different treatment that we might recommend. So for the most part, this wetland you're seeing over here on your left was spared because it was underwater. A lot of it. You will find, like I say, you will find oiled vegetation up a little bit higher. And as we go down this way, you'll start to see more on the forest floor in some places. But so our in wetlands and in places like this, we've learned over the years that if you try to go in and clean them up too aggressively, you can very easily do more harm than good. So those places, we're going to keep equipment out, we're going to keep people out as much as possible. If we have some surgical teams that would go in, and if there's a particularly heavily oiled area, we would go in, we can put marsh boards down, things like that, so we don't want to push it into the sediment, so because then it might stay here longer. So basically we would like to cut, take out the heavily oiled debris and let the forest do what the forest is going to do.
So I've got a question based on where the oil has settled. You said it's not on the floor, but
some places it is.
Okay. And what's the impact? I guess that's the biggest question.
Right.
What is the impact to the environment?
Well, oil, there are toxic components of oil, the volatile components like refined products, gasoline, etc. This is not one of them, fortunately. Also, it does have some of those volatile products in it, but during the storm, 180 mile an hour wind coming out into the air, a lot of that was lost. So this is, there's no more odor out here, the acutely toxic things are gone, and a lot of the chemicals that are in oil, there are plant waxes and plant resins because that's where oil comes from. And there are hydrocarbons that some are not dissimilar to what you would find in the burn. There are pyrogenic hydrocarbons and petrogenic hydrocarbons, one meaning they come from fire, the other come from petroleum from the ground. So the impact of vegetation, if it doesn't kill it right away, then it probably won't. If you can get the oil off the leaves, it will recover and grow. But what we are seeing here is the effect of saltwater intrusion on the pine forest. You're seeing in this entire end of the island.
So what looks like burnt is saltwater intrusion.
What looks like burnt right here is actually burnt. It's a fire ecology forest. A Caribbean pine forest is here because lightning strikes happen from time to time. The forest burns, and it takes care of the deciduous broadleaf trees. If it doesn't burn for 100 years, the deciduous broadleaf trees will grow, they'll shade out these trees, and then you'll have a coppice with mahogany and things like that you occasionally get down here. So the Caribbean pine forest is here because there are fires. This one, there have been saltwater intrusion events in the past that have been damaging to the forest here. This is a pretty big one. You can occasionally see some green needles on some of these trees. Right there, right there. We're hopeful, but it's possible that quite a few of these will perish.
You even see, I see green on the lower levels.
Yes.
On the
Yes.
that seem to be returning.
Yes.
Is that natural or is that a result?
It's natural. None of this was here after the hurricane. There was up in here, everything was dead. These thatch palms, and they come out first. Some of the things like thatch palm and poisonwood, they're some of the first pioneers after a traumatic event like this. And we haven't set up any monitoring plots yet, but just visually, as you'll see when we go through the other area, you'll see the plants coming up in the oiled places where there's oil and places where there's not. And sometimes in places where there's not oil, there's no plants coming up, and vice versa. A lot of it has to do with how much soil is on the forest floor. There's some places that are just rock and very little soil. And other places have a little bit more of a soil horizon, and vegetation may be returning quickly. So we will see if there's any impact in the longer term. Visually, you can see the dark color, but there are things growing in both locations. We believe it's a good idea to carefully get out the heaviest oiled material on the forest floor. And in places where we take out a lot and remove that soil horizon, then we would like to put back some natural material on the forest floor. That helps the microbes and other things that will be breaking down the oil.
What is the potential long-term effect of all of this?
It's probably early to say. I'm optimistic. Oil and vegetation, we get it returns pretty well. So we're cautiously optimistic that the prognosis will be that equal to what's happening out here. The tragedy is the hurricane. It affected much more forest than the oil. Not that it's not a problem, but the goal is the recovery of the forest and the return the same way that the forest returns naturally without changing species composition, or we shied away from adding chemicals and fertilizers that help eat the oil because we're afraid that it might fertilize some things that we don't want to fertilize. It's fairly nutrient poor environment, and so we should probably keep it the way it was.
Further in, near the wetlands, the cleanup is a lot more delicate and deliberate.
And this, we probably wouldn't send crews into this lightly oiling condition because you've got all this vegetation coming up. This is native. So we don't want to walk through here while it's returning if there's just a very little bit of oil. And it's also drying so that it won't come off on wildlife.
So it is?
There's a little bit of oil here on these needles we found. Rub them. You have to rub it a lot harder to get any to come off now than you used to. It's really drying and weathering, becoming less of a risk to you don't want to touch that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not it's just our safety protocols.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. But it is, so you have to rub it harder.
You have to rub it harder to get any to come off. The contact risk to wildlife becomes low, and there's so little in here that sending teams of workers through here could do damage to a lot of the vegetation that's coming back. Okay. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
This area was cleaned by workers. If you get down by the water's edge,
good.
A couple things.
Good.
Yeah. What you don't see on the water, even though there's the tops of the vegetation out here, you can see oil on the tops of the vegetation out here. What you don't see on the water is sheen, because as we were talking about at the last stop, those light ends, the products that you find in gasoline like naphthalene and things, have gone to the atmosphere, and there's less, the sheen is virtually gone. So there's not a lot of this stuff dissolves in water. It will initially, some of it, a small percentage of oil dissolves in water, but generally the idiom that oil and water don't mix is correct. But enough of it, if you put enough oil on water, it will, especially with the light ends are present, will harm fish. You have native endemic mosquito fish and pupfish in here, and we can see them in here. When you walk out here and you can see them swimming around in the water, so they're in there. They survived the hurricane and the event, and we would like to go very lightly on this wetland. You can see how easily, when equipment gets down here and disturbs the sediment, and then oil can be pushed in. So we're not going to put workers in this wetland if we can help it. There's a lot of good things going on out there. A lot of things are growing. The animals are coming back. The wildlife risk is decreasing. So we do want to clean up the heavily oiled debris around the edge of these wetlands, perhaps bring in some of that the natural stuff back, the forest floor, the organics. And then in general, what science has learned over the years is you leave wetlands alone unless they're physically buried with oil. And you actually have to, we have a saying, we say you don't want to kill it because it might be sick. And we're treating the forest the same way. It's definitely sick, but to get oil out of this limestone porous rock, the forest would have to be destroyed. And even then, you would not get all the oil. And so, if the vegetation is going to grow, if the burn residue that you find on trees is similar, and the natural microbes start to break it down, maybe the sick forest can survive and we don't have to kill it. We would prefer not to bulldoze the forest. It's a pretty special place back here. This is brackish pretty much all the time. There's some commonality with the ocean. You'll see some red mangroves out here, which are salt tolerant. And so we want to go light here. In the forest, however, where there's some more areas to clean down there, and if you see up here in the forest, it's a kind of a tough terrain to work in. It's ankle injury country, so we're gonna have to be very careful. But what's gonna happen in the forest up here, we'd like for crews to walk through, hand cutting and removing all of the oiled vegetation you see that's shiny and black,
right,
so that we can get it down to the point where, as we say in the oil spill world, the 10% of the effort for the first 90% of the recovery, and that last 10% of the oil takes 90% of the effort. People would be out here for months trying to scrape this out of here, and they would probably only get a few percent. And so at this point, it's best to get some organics in here, let the microbes go to work, and get the plants coming back.
What's the time frame for recovery for something like this? I mean, at what point do you walk back out here and it sort of looks normal, right, or even begins to feel normal?
Well, if there was no hurricane, that time frame to recovery would probably be a couple seasons, where you would have a hard time. You wouldn't find any more oiled vegetation. It would all be dried, decomposing. You could probably dig down. You would be able to dig down and find it, but it would be a couple of seasons. The hurricane it'd probably be similar a couple of seasons, but it's not going to look like the forest it did before because of the hurricane effects at this point. The goal is to just to make it look like the undisturbed areas and let it recover.
Given sort of what I'm looking at here, will this ever be conducive to wildlife returning?
This will. There's more clean. This will be removed, and some sorbent in here, but this will dry, and the microbes will be inert. Like the highway is asphalt that's made from crude oil. It dries and it becomes a hard piece. So it's like a piece of the highway on the side of the road is not a wildlife risk or anything like that.
This forest is where teams have been on the ground cleaning up.
So what we want to do and what has been done is we have cleaned areas for debris and for oiled soil, and also leaves and trees and bushes. Some of this is taken back to the site, and that's what we will continue to do with what we're going to be going through the woods as we've been doing, and getting away the debris that's oiled, and also parts of leaves that we might take away. We will not cut down trees. We will try to leave it as untouched as possible, but take away the worst part of the oil that we see is left. Then this will be taken back to site, and we will do bioremediation back at the site, mixing the oiled soil in addition to taking the debris, the organic material into this, and we will do enhanced bioremediation. So this we'll be doing together with a consultant company, and hoping also to onboard students from the University of Bahamas.
So once you remove the debris and it goes through that process, what then happens to it?
It should be composting by itself. You have biodegradation. Organisms will start to eat on this, and within we would set up a monitoring program to see how much is left of oil in the soil, and try to different steps of maybe replanting. So these are issues that we're discussing now, and also we've been in contact with the University of Bahamas and pine tree experts, and also getting advice for them on how would we replant this, and if the government's approve and wants us to replant. So it's an ongoing discussion.
You mentioned you're not tearing down any trees, but I noticed to the front there are quite a few trees that have been removed.
Yeah, so that was the initial phase of the response. There was oil covered all over, and we did not have full control of the wildlife impact. If we would have a wildlife impact here, and areas needed to be cleaned to avoid wildlife getting into the oil. Now, as wildlife expert Wanda has said earlier, that we see that there's very little wildlife here. And maybe it could have been possible to do it in a different way, but at the time of response, this is the best methods we have to remove and limit the exposure for wildlife.
Animal droppings along the trail also gave us evidence that wildlife is slowly returning to the area. Back across the street, we got a glimpse into one of the most important fueling points, the food tent. About 280 meals are prepared daily on property. The food is hot and fresh. It was then on to the flotels, two massive vessels berthed in the harbor, providing housing, meals, equipment, and even fresh water. The River Bend and Worland are the shipping vessels for all containers, heavy equipment, and cargo. On the Worland, we climbed up onto the helipad to an awaiting helicopter. It doubles as an evacuation flight for anyone in need of emergency care. But on this day, our short flight would only allow us to survey the property. From the air, we get a different perspective of just where the oil deposits were dumped and with the heaviest concentration. And coming up,
When it comes to the environment, that's also a long recovery. It will take some time, but we do have that commitment to go ahead and see this through and to get it done. We won't know the long-term effects just now. We need to do our initial studies, and then that will come over time. We will make the monitoring plan so that we can evaluate how the forest recovers, what impact there is to the groundwater, and do any remediation efforts that we need to do.
You know, Matt, where in the world is Matt Lauer? Where in the world is Ellison Greenslade? I'm so used about the Blue Value of Constitution in Atlanta. So we can talk about it.
On the record tonight, the government's purchase of the Grand Bahama is a hot subject in the news.
You can have one good thing, or you can have everything, including dragons. Free HBO Go at 90+ channels. $99 a month gets you phone, internet, and cable. Ask for Trio. Call 601-2200 or email residentialsales@cablebahamas.com. Rav, you and us together.
Equinor is involved in the exploration, development, and production of oil and gas, as well as wind and solar power. The company sells crude oil and is a major supplier of natural gas. Every day they deliver oil, gas, and wind power to energize more than 170 million people around the world. But since the passage of Hurricane Dorian, the company has had to put significant resources to clean up the damage left by the oil spill, while simultaneously trying to rebuild the lives of Grand Bahamians. In this segment, we talk with two Bahamians with leading roles in the cleanup and recovery. Equinor touts safety and security as a prerequisite for success and a top priority. But when Hurricane Dorian blew over 1 million gallons of oil into the Grand Bahama landscape, those principles were put to the test. On the outside, flags from 13 nations signifying the multinational effort, each flag representing the various nationalities at work here. Yet, Grand Bahama native Kevin Stewart is one of the Bahamians leading the work on the ground.
For us, in everything we do, PAIR is what we subscribe to. That's people, environment, assets, reputation. So in everything we do, that's the premise of which we are guided by. That's our values of Equinor. And for me personally and the team, the preparation, the execution, and now, that's still what we do. So in the days leading up to the storm, it was ensuring that our people were secured. So we were able to have half of the staff prepare their homes while half of the staff prepare the terminal. And that's how we did it. So we had preparations according to all of our usual standards and our procedures, and we prepared our usual way. We've been through many storms before. For us then came Dorian. And Dorian was unlike any other storm. The magnitude and size was one thing. But I think what got us was the length of time it stayed there. We were under Dorian for 40 hours. It sat over the eastern end of the island for 40 hours. And I think that's where we bared the brunt of it. So, you know, I'm no weather expert, but I've been through a lot of these. I've worked at 2 different terminals, and for me, there's no no, I'm convinced that it was tornadic activity. You know, the path the storm took, I'm convinced that there was a tornado that passed through. And I think that speaks to what happened.
Can you give us an assessment of the damage and specifically the oil spill? What happened that led to that oil coming out of those containers and onto the land in the amounts that it did?
Okay, from an amount perspective, oil really gives off a worse appearance than it is. But for a company like Equinor, 1 drop of oil is significant when it comes to our people and the environment. So from a quantity perspective, we had 1.8 million barrels of oil in the terminal before the hurricane. We lost about 6% of that 1.8. So from a quantitative perspective, it was like 119,000 barrels, which was equivalent to about 1.8 million gallons. So that's 6% of what was in there. Those oils were stored in 3 tanks, and the other tanks were empty, but 6% is what we lost.
And how did that loss happen?
It was skimmed off the top of 2 of those 3 tanks. 1 tank was in fine, but 2 of those 3 tanks, the roofs were blown off, and a top layer of each tank blowed in that.
Are you able to say what kind of conditions those tanks are built to withstand? I mean, this is a Category 5, but what are you able to say what they are built to withstand?
Oh, definitely. Our tanks are built to withstand Category 5 winds. That, I think for me personally, that wasn't the issue there. The issue for me was the length of time that the storm would have stayed over the terminal. Yeah.
And are you able to say what or how far that oil reached, and what in terms of miles? And are you talking just inland, or are you talking about oil that went out to sea as well?
No, we have no evidence of any oil hitting the water.
By water, you mean the seawater or the sea?
The seawater, yes. We've done many overflights. We've done testing in the water, and we follow leads on any aerial photos, whether they're real or not. We follow the lead, and we've been out there and tested, and to date there's no evidence of any oil hitting the water. As for the distance, those distances are still being quantified by our SCAT team, and you have to take into perspective what has happened here. From a priority perspective, we had oil that hit the ground. That has been the priority of getting that up. And there was some oil out of the terminal, and that was the concern, it being the public. So the resources have been prioritized on the ground in front of the terminal. So that has been the priority. Now that we've gotten the majority of that oil up, we are starting to get into the details of how far and distances and volumes and whatnot right now.
What has been your initial assessment of the impact on the environment?
And this is personal for me. I live here. I'm not going anywhere. So 1 drop of oil, to me, is huge. And so when I talk about impact, I may be biased from a perspective of it's huge to me, because this is who I am. This is who Equinor is. It's huge. There's no difference between this being in Norway's back door or it being here in the Bahamas. The commitment from this company is tremendous, and it gets emotional at times because, you know, I personally lost everything, but that's small things. When I look at my employees, when I look at my staff, 25% of my staff lost their homes. So when we talk about environmental impact, that's huge, but the people impact is just as big for me.
And what measures were taken immediately after the storm to begin the cleanup, and I guess recovery in some instances?
And I'm so happy you asked that question. The preparation for this recovery started well before. It started many years before this hurricane. We have been in constant emergency response training, in Norway, Houston, Stamford. We have a world conglomerate network that we prepare for these type of incidents. We hope they never happen, but we are in constant preparation. But as the storm was imminent, we already had crews mobilized in Stamford, Houston, Norway, already preparing logistically with ships and manpower on the way. So on the initial stages of the storm, while we were still in our homes being battered, we had teams already preparing to get here. And for us, the first team that got in, even before we had access to the terminal, there was a SCAT team. There's a team from the U.S. that came in via helicopter because there was no access by road. There was the weather, definitely you couldn't get vessels up. But this team came in by helicopter. They contacted the authorities and they came in and they hit the ground. So by the time we got there, we were able to get an assessment, terminal secured, and we already had ships and manpower on the ground. So to date, we have like 365 persons on the ground working around the clock. You can see the command center. This is manned about 15 to 16 hours every day. And there's a lot of logistics behind what you see on the ground. There's a lot, and I'm so proud of the employees. I'm proud of the people. I'm so proud of the Bahamas on the whole, the worldwide community. We have about 13 different nations. You know, we go by a mantra, one team, one fight, because we have so many people working together to get this done. And the commitment is strong. We're going to get this cleaned up, and we're going to get it cleaned up right.
What would you say, you can see what's happening, for instance, in the command center here, and people are working. But what are the majority of the people doing out to the site, and how are they physically cleaning, and what are people doing on a daily basis to begin to continue to clean up? I want to understand sort of the physical work that's being done.
Well, the first thing is we have a mindset that everyone has to be safe. Everyone has to be prepared. You have to be dressed properly. We have constant air monitoring going on around the terminal. On a daily basis, you can have, on a daily normal operation, we have hourly testing, 2 hourly testings with the air to test the hydrocarbons in the air. Right now, it's going 24 hours. We have persons testing the air continuously. So that's the first thing, preparation and being safe. On a daily operation, you have toolbox meetings in the morning where everyone is prepped, safety, everyone is hydrated, everyone is fed, and then you hit the ground for a typical day. In the initial phases, it was removing the heavy oil, the freestanding oil from off the ground. That's via vac truck, that's via skimmers, oil response equipment. That's going on. Now we're getting down into the deep finesse cleaning. You're going to start to see the tanks being cleaned. Some persons may ask the question, why the tanks weren't clean initially? They weren't the priority. The priority initially was getting that freestanding oil up off the ground from around the terminal and keeping the public safe. Now the tank and all of that that's sexy, that's a good look, and we're going to get to that. We're going to get the tanks cleaned up and looking right. But the first initial priority was the people and the environment.
Do you think you will ever be able to say that you have fully cleaned up all the oil, or you have completely eradicated the area from the oil and the debris and the residue?
I don't think in any type of disaster such as this you would be able to say that you got everything up. But oil is a natural property of the earth, and there's some areas where we could do more harm by protruding deep into the forestry, like the forestry you're seeing today. There's some things you can see that nature's just the best course. But we have teams of specialists who will guide us. We have third-party vendors who will set the course for us, and we will follow it to make the best assessment and take the best course of action.
At his side is another Bahamian who serves as country asset manager. She too is shouldering a tremendous responsibility of country and commitment to her job.
The people aspect is obviously, that's the most important aspect for us. We really wanted to focus a lot on our employees. They had a lot of losses, not just personally, but also within their family. So we've been able to provide aid throughout. We have a distribution center that's been set up for our employees where we continuously provide them aid. Anything they need, we had people with children, people with older parents to be able to give them what they need so they could actually come back and return to work, because we wanted them to return to work if they were able to. From the beginning, we've had a psychologist on the ground. We've been able to provide them with psychological help. Again, I think even now they're starting to do more assessments with our local doctor just to see how they are, and we will continue to follow them up. It's a policy that Equinor has. It's part of the caring value that we have, that we follow people up after events such as this. When it comes to the environment, that's also a long recovery. It will take some time, but we do have that commitment to go ahead and see this through and to get it done. We won't know the long-term effects just now. We need to do our initial studies, and then that will come over time. We will make the monitoring plan so that we can evaluate how the forest recovers, what impact there is to the groundwater, and do any remediation efforts that we need to do. And that's coming. We're getting those things in place. We have the scientists on board. We have an environmental contractor that has done this work previously in the Bahamas on many different sites. So we have the expertise we need, and now it's just for us to go ahead and see that through.
What would you say, or let me back it up a bit, how are you able to prioritize what is needed? We've talked about the human element, but from the environmental perspective, you have concerns about the water table, you have concerns about wildlife and the impact. You also have concerns about the effects on the forestry, on the actual flora and fauna in there, and other areas, the wetlands. How do you prioritize what gets your attention?
So what gets our attention is we have a team of scientists in, and they actually focus in on what is the most ecologically sensitive areas, what has the biggest impact. First and foremost, the thing that we're really concerned about is the groundwater. We want to make sure that's safe. It is limited because there's not so much population in that area. I think largely the persons that use that groundwater in that area is the terminal. So it is limited in that effect, but that's something that we want to clarify just so the public understands that it's safe, or if it's not safe, that we take actions to quickly remediate that. And then when it comes to kind of ecological sensitivity, we have a team of scientists on the ground, and they advise us and let us know we should prioritize the wetlands. We should prioritize the wetlands first, which trees or which species they have, what's endemic to the Bahamas, things that we should actually look at and really go after and try to clean up first. So we get a lot of advice from the scientists, not just external scientists, but we've also engaged local scientists in the community to see what they've done. They've done a lot of work within the local community on saplings, what happens to the pine with saltwater intrusion. So we want to piggyback off of that. We don't come in saying we know everything. No, we need this to be a dialogue with local experts and with external experts who are not native to the Bahamas.
And what about local environmental groups? Are they being engaged, brought in? Are you seeking advice from them?
We're open and transparent. That's another one of our values, is open. So we will continue to be open. We will always allow them to come in to see what we're doing. We're not afraid of anything we're doing. We're taking all the right actions that we need to do to ensure that we get this done safely and in the right way. So we extend it. We extend an invitation. Come in, come see what we're doing. We're proud of the work we're doing. These guys are working hard. They're putting in long hours, long days, and our commitment is really to get this done, and it's work that we're proud of. Yeah.
You're pretty satisfied that the intrusion was on the land side, but will you continue to monitor on the seaside as well to see what effect this may have had, or what a long-term effect may be?
We have not observed any oil to the water. So we've done extensive air surveillance over Grand Bahama, over the Abacos. We've actually taken a person in a hoist from an helicopter to take every area of interest that we have. We have not seen any oil in the water. So that's not our concern. It is an onshore spill. And so now that we have that, we can focus all our efforts into getting the onshore cleanup and trying to recover the forest area. That has all of our attention right now.
So, looking at the damage that was done and how the facility was compromised, is that now a concern in terms of in going forward? Are you going to look at how do you reinforce, how do you rebuild, how do you, in essence, prevent this from happening again?
We had a structural engineer that came in last week to give us some kind of preliminary input on just that. Should we do reinforcements? What will happen with the terminal? How do we design this better and make it safer, as you say. This is a design that's used worldwide. It's a worldwide standard. So I think it will create a lot of conversations in the industry as to what should be the next steps. Should we do more? Do we take this as a one-off? I think our approach is always a risk-based approach. Like, what is the probability that we can have this happen again? What should we do? And I think those conversations in the industry and the industry standards will definitely help to drive that, because we will always be compliant to whatever industry standards are. We will.
Do you see this being a model for other places in the world in preparing for disasters and even in dealing with the aftermath?
Yeah, I do. I think we have so much limitations. We have so many limitations being on an island. It's not just an oil spill, but it's also such a humanitarian issues, that's really coupled or crippled, where you have just not insufficient logistical equipment, because what was here was actually damaged. So then it becomes, how do you solve these problems and how do you do them quickly so you can be effective? What we're doing, I think, with all of the nations we have somewhere between 12 to 14 countries of people here putting this work in. It's something that we're proud of. I think we have a lot of lessons learned within our own company, but we will take these and definitely apply those to more, well, hopefully we don't have them, but we'll apply those to disasters that are around the world. There's much that's gone right here, and much that we can actually learn from. So we will take those lessons here and apply them worldwide.
There was and still is a lot of anxiety in the public about what has happened. Claims that Bahamian workers weren't being protected, claims that this was much larger than anticipated, or that you were saying, or that environmental groups weren't being given enough information. There is a lot of anxiety. How do you address that? What do you say to people who are sitting at home afraid that their water could be contaminated, that the wildlife may not return, or we may have some long-term effect? People are anxious about it because of what it is. What do you say to those individuals who are concerned about the future of the area around this?
I think for the public in general, it's somewhat of a pity. I think that we don't know who Equinor is as a company. It's a company I'm extremely proud to work for. Our values guide what we do. And everything that we do, we are the oil and gas producer that is most environmentally friendly. Our carbon footprint is the lowest among any operator there is around. It is a focus of ours. It's something that we operate with integrity. We're open and transparent, and they guide us in every single thing that we do. I say to those persons, look and see who Equinor is around the world. Around the world, we're known for that. We're known for being transparent. We're known for our integrity. We're known for our high standards in how we take care of people. And we will always be known that way. I think to run after kind of rumors and the stories that they have, I think a part of that shows who we are. We focused on our people first, and that's our value. Our reputation can take these hard hits. It can take these, negative stories. We'll come back to that and we will clear that up. But our focus is always safety, then the environment, then our asset, and then our reputation. That's last. So for me, throughout this, we've completely lived our values. We've shown who we are.
What has been the Bahamian participation, yourself, Kevin, others who are at the forefront, and then beyond that, just the involvement of Bahamians in general in this project? Even looking around this room, I see a split. But, outside of that, what has been the involvement, and what has that meant to you personally as a Bahamian?
I think again, it goes to show who we work for. We have the deputy incident commander. It's for a reason that Kevin is the incident commander, because it's his terminal. He's the terminal manager. The rest of us are here to support him. Our deputy incident commander, he came in. He's a high-level senior management person, and he was very clear. We're not going to be a bull in a china shop. We're here to respect you. We're here to respect Bahamians. We want local involvement. This is your show. We're here to support you with this, to give you every single thing you need. And that's how we work. That's how Equinor is. We've always gotten that support. It's always been this transfer of knowledge. We will help you to get this done. It just speaks to volume of who we work for, and it's a company I'm extremely proud to represent and to be here.
That's going to do it for our program tonight. Special thanks to the people at Equinor for accommodating our request. Thanks to my production and technical teams. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See you next time right here on The Record.